welcome to Asia House. It's great having you here.
Good to be with you, Hande. Thank you.
As part of our talk tonight, we wanted to do a short interview with you about your new book, Inglorious Empire, What the British Did to India. To start off with, you're a very multifaceted person. You've held many positions throughout your career. You're an MP right now, you're a peacekeeper, a refugee worker, and an administrator at high levels. And on top of that, you're also an author. Your political involvement surely directs your writing, as we haven't read a fiction title from you in a while. Have you simply stopped writing fiction?
Oh, it's not just that, Hande. The truth is that fiction requires not just time, which is scarce enough, but a space inside your head to create an alternative moral universe, to populate it with characters, episodes, snatches of dialogue that are as real to you while you're working in that world as the real world around you. Now, in the kind of things that I do, my political life and my public life, it's very difficult to sustain that illusion. My laptops are littered with half-begun manuscripts, simply because of the fact, very simply, that I constantly am interrupted. Whereas non-fiction, I find you can pick up the threads more easily. Go back, reread what you were writing, you get back into the flow of the argument you were making, and you can continue to do your piece. So I find that for that reason, fiction has been difficult to sustain, simply because that illusory world you create, that glass palace, if you like, gets shattered when the real world intrudes as often and as insistently as it does in my kind of situation.
I understand. At the Oxford Union debate in 2015, you gave a very poignant speech, which led you to write your recently published title. I must say, this is a very brave title, as it challenges what history has taught us in the 20th and so far in the 21st century. Can you tell us a bit about how the idea of writing this book culminated?
Well, it really started with that Oxford debate that you mentioned, which actually gave me an opportunity in 10 or 12 minutes to summarize my strong views about British colonialism in India and the entire experience from an Indian point of view. I forgot about it soon after I delivered the speech, but a few weeks later the Oxford Union posted it on YouTube, and the blessed thing went viral. It suddenly started attracting a lot of attention, and I think within 24 hours it had been downloaded more than 3 million times, and each of these downloads very often was replayed by various people. It kind of got around a lot. And in the midst of that general sort of excitement about that speech, my publishers called me and said, listen, you've got to make this into a book. And I said, listen, everyone knows this stuff. How does it matter? Well, what's the point of writing a book? And my publisher said, I'm sorry, if they did know all the stuff, your speech wouldn't have gone viral. You've opened their eyes, and now you need to do it in a more substantive way. So that persuaded me, and that's what lay behind this book. It gave me an opportunity to, of course, lay out my arguments in greater detail than you can do in a short speech. And I was forced really to research some of the things that I believed I'd always known, but which I needed to substantiate, both in terms of hard numbers and facts, but also in terms of citations and sources, because it had to stand up to the inevitable critics who were going to say, well, did you just make that up off the top of your head? I didn't. And so it's a book with, 30 odd pages of endnotes, in which I source back pretty much all the statements that are likely to raise eyebrows and indicate the sources which people can go to. I'm not a professional historian, though I have studied history as an undergraduate, but I do feel that any of us who write works of even popular history, but we have to actually understand that we're entitled to our own opinions, but we're not entitled to our own facts. The facts are sacred, and we have to actually leave them there for people to challenge them. Now, somebody else might find a different set of facts that give them the opportunity to craft a different opinion, and more power to them if they do. But I don't want anyone saying to me, he got that wrong because he didn't look up the right material. I've tried to do that as thoroughly as I can.
Thank you. Did the fact that 2017 marks the 70th anniversary of the partition of India have anything to do with you starting to write the book? Because in chapter 3, titled Divide et Impera, Divide and Rule, you wrote about this very extensively. So I was wondering, when you first started, did you have it in your mind that you would like to produce a book that would include the partition of India and its effects?
Well, I wanted to write a comprehensive book on the entire British colonial experience in India, and in so doing, inevitably divide and rule had to come in. It's something that many of us have felt strongly about for a long time in India, that this was an unnecessary and tragic division of a country that has mired us in perpetual hostility and conflict with people who were once our compatriots. And that is obviously deeply tragic and sad for many of us who cared just about the human beings, as it were, living together in India. But equally, people had forgotten that this wasn't some sort of time-honored conflict, that has gone on for centuries, as some people now like to pretend it has. Hindus and Muslims defined in that monolithic way, in conflict with each other, is actually a British creation. We've certainly had invasions in the past by Mughal kings and monarchs, but those who stayed on to rule in India ruled with the cooperation of Hindus. Even the man who's known as the most fanatically Islamist of our Mughal emperors, Aurangzeb, had Hindu generals in his army and Hindu courtiers in his court. Similarly, the man whom some hail as a symbol of Hindu resistance to the Mughal tyranny, the Emperor Shivaji, the Maratha, had Muslims in his army, including generals, artillery captains, and so on. So if you look at all this, there was traditionally an involvement of both sides together, and it's when the British saw in the famous revolt of 1857, what they call the Sepoy Mutiny, they saw Hindu and Muslim soldiers fighting side by side and under each other's command, under the banner of the Mughal emperor against the hated foreign British oppressor, that they vowed this should not be allowed to happen again. Divide et impera, wrote Lord Elphinstone, divide and rule, was the old Roman maxim, and it should be ours. And that became then a very systematic and deliberate policy choice by the British, that you can hold India down more effectively if you divide its people against each other. And this became a systematic policy, including a conscious desire to instill a sense of separateness amongst the Muslim population, religiously defined, which in that form had not existed before.
So to go back to my question, when you started writing the book, was this on your mind?
So the divide and rule policy and leading up to and culminating in partition was very much on my mind. Was the 70th anniversary in my mind? I was not particularly conscious of that, because in fact my publishers had something else in mind for me to write on the 70th anniversary, which I never got around to writing. I wrote this instead. This really, the timing of this was prompted by the speech rather than by the 70th anniversary. But it's actually worked out quite well, because India is on many people's minds in both Britain and in India today.
Okay, thank you. The book highlights many aspects of India's misunderstood and mistreated culture, history, sociology, and politics. Do you think that a book is enough for doing justice to what has been ignored for many years?
Well, it starts people thinking, doesn't it? I mean, the whole idea is you cover the entire ground in 300 pages. You know that each chapter practically would be the subject of a fat historical book by a professional historian. And if those whose minds are sparked off by reading this book are then tempted to do further research and more in-depth reading, more power to them. I haven't written this for scholars. I really have written it for the intelligent layperson who's interested in these issues, cares about knowing what happened in 200 years of British rule in India, and on that basis would want to read the book to enlighten themselves. The kind of people would have an intelligent living room conversation about it, rather than who would be teaching academic seminars about it. So I don't know if any serious scholars would want to read this book or will agree or disagree with it, but they're not my target audience. I really want this to be something that people think about who care about this subject. It's a work essentially, I suppose, of what one might call popular history, except it doesn't tell a story, it makes an argument.
So do you think that Inglorious Empire will have any impact on the way people view the British Empire, or for that matter, India today?
Well, I think if you mean whether it would have an impact in England and Britain, I'd say that some of the impact is already apparent and has been actually quite surprisingly positive. I'm quite gratified to see the kind of reviews I've got here, which have been overwhelmingly appreciative and supportive, and I've also been impressed by a piece like a column by the Conservative peer Lord Ridley in the London Times, who argued very sympathetically that this actually was an important and accurate portrayal that Brits ought to read. I've seen similar pieces in the Financial Times and other establishment publications. So to that degree, the British response is an interesting one. And I think if it means that it informs, as it were, some of Britain's thinking about how much you can expect of India and what in turn should define your attitude to India, so much the better. Don't forget that for the last 15 years, there's been a lot of revisionist writing. Historians like Niall Ferguson and Lawrence James and Andrew Roberts and so on have been suggesting the British Empire was a good thing for India, that it laid the foundations of India's success in today's globalized world and so on, which frankly needed to be challenged, and that's what I've tried to do as well.
Thank you very much for that. I'm looking forward to the talk tonight.
Thank you, Hande. Appreciate it.
Thank you.